Hello and welcome to Psychology Insights, a new podcast series where we explore the fascinating and lesser-known aspects of human psychology. I'm Clara Mitchell, cognitive psychologist, and your guide through the complex landscape of the human mind.
And I'm Leo Torres. I've spent the last decade as a science journalist trying to understand why we humans do the weird things we do. I'll be asking the questions that hopefully help us all make sense of the sometimes counterintuitive nature of our minds.
We're absolutely thrilled to launch this series where we'll be delving into the psychological nuances behind everyday experiences, revealing insights into our brain's capabilities, limitations, and quirks.
And hopefully making it all accessible and, dare I say, entertaining. Before we dive in, quick note for listeners, you can use episode chat for any questions about the content we cover today. We'd love to hear from you.
Today's episode is titled The Illusion of Rational Thought, where we'll explore how our supposedly rational minds are influenced by cognitive biases and heuristics that shape our decision-making processes in ways we rarely notice.
I'm particularly excited about this one because, well, I like to think I'm pretty rational, but research suggests I'm probably just as deluded as everyone else about that.
We're all in that boat, Leo. Even knowing about these biases doesn't fully protect us from them. It's like, oh wait, I promised myself no analogies on this show.
That's right, we're keeping it concrete and evidence-based. Let's get started with our first segment.
Our first segment today is the myth of pure rationality. For centuries, philosophers and economists have championed the idea that humans are fundamentally rational beings, carefully weighing evidence and making optimal decisions.
Right. Like the whole economic man concept, Homo economicus, that perfectly rational agent who always acts to maximize personal utility. That's what I learned in Econ 101.
Exactly. And it's a compelling story. We'd all like to think we're driven by reason rather than impulse or bias. But over the past few decades, psychological research has thoroughly dismantled this way.
I remember reading Kahneman and Tversky's work in college. Didn't they basically show that we use mental shortcuts that often lead us astray?
Yes. Their work was revolutionary. They introduced what's now known as dual process theory, which suggests we have two distinct modes of thinking, System 1 and System 2.
Could you break those down for our listeners?
Sure. System 1 is fast, automatic, and intuitive. It's what you use when you recognize a friend's face or know that 2 + 2 = 4 without thinking. System 2 is slow, deliberative, and analytical, what you engage when solving a complex math problem or weighing the pros and cons of a major decision.
And most of the time we're operating on System 1, right? I remember last week when I automatically grabbed my old apartment keys, even though I moved a month ago. Classic System 1 autopilot.
That's a perfect example. System 1 is incredibly efficient, but prone to systematic errors. And here's what's fascinating. Recent research shows that even when we think we're being purely rational and engaging, System 2, our intuitions and emotions are still significantly influencing us behind the scenes.
That reminds me of a study I covered where brain imaging showed emotional centers activating before people even consciously considered a moral dilemma. Our emotional response was already shaping the supposedly rational conclusion.
Exactly right. And what's even more interesting is that research from places like the Max Planck Institute has demonstrated that we often make decisions before we're consciously aware of them. Then our rational mind creates a story after the fact to explain why we chose what we did.
So we're essentially rationalizing rather than being rational?
In many cases, yes. This challenges the fundamental notion of humans as purely rational agents. It's not that we can't think rationally, we absolutely can, but rationality is far more constrained and influenced by unconscious factors than we typically acknowledge.
All right, so we've established that we're not the perfectly rational creatures we might like to believe. Let's move on to our next segment, cognitive shortcuts in action. Clara, what exactly are these mental shortcuts?
These shortcuts, or heuristics as psychologists call them, are mental rules of thumb that help us make judgments quickly without having to analyze every bit of information. They're incredibly useful. We couldn't function without them, but they can lead to systematic errors.
I think I experience this when I'm grocery shopping hungry. Suddenly everything looks essential, and I end up with 3 types of cheese I don't need.
That's partly a visceral state influence, but yes. Let's talk about a common one, the availability heuristic. This is our tendency to judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind.
Oh, like how people became terrified of shark attacks after watching Jaws, even though the actual risk is incredibly low.
Perfect example. After dramatic news coverage of shark attacks, people overestimate their likelihood because vivid examples readily come to mind. Similarly, after hearing about a plane crash, many people temporarily fear flying, even though driving to the airport is statistically much more dangerous.
I definitely do this. Last month there was a break-in on my street, and I've been double-checking my locks obsessively, even though the neighborhood crime rate hasn't actually changed.
That's classic availability heuristic. Another powerful one is anchoring our tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter.
I think I've heard about this with pricing, right?
Yes. In a famous study, people were asked whether the percentage of African countries in the UN was higher or lower than a randomly generated number like 10% or 65%. Remarkably, these arbitrary numbers significantly influenced their subsequent estimates.
Wait, so completely random numbers affected their judgment? That's wild.
Absolutely. And retailers use this all the time. When you see an original price crossed out with a sale price, that original price anchors your perception of value.
Guilty as charged. I bought a jacket last week that was 50% off and felt like I was getting a steal, even though I have no idea if that original price was inflated.
And then there's priming, where exposure to one stimulus influences your response to a subsequent stimulus, often without awareness. In one classic study, participants exposed to words associated with elderly stereotypes actually walked more slowly when leaving the experiment.
No way! So just reading words about aging affected their physical behavior, and they didn't realize it?
They had no idea. Though I should note some of these classic priming studies have faced replication challenges in recent years, which is an important reminder about the evolving nature of psychological science.
So to sum up, we've got the availability heuristic affecting our risk assessment, anchoring influencing our numeric judgments, and priming subtly shaping our perceptions, all operating largely beneath our conscious awareness.
Exactly. And the scary part is these are just a few examples of dozens of cognitive shortcuts that influence us daily.
Let's move on to a bias I suspect I'm guilty of all the time. Confirmation bias. This is our next segment, the confirmation trap.
Oh, confirmation bias is fascinating. It's our tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs while giving disproportionately less attention to information that contradicts them.
I noticed this with my fitness tracker. When it says I burned 500 calories on a run, I think, what an accurate device. But when it says I only burned 200, I'm convinced it must be malfunctioning.
That's a perfect everyday example. This bias is remarkably pervasive. In a classic study by Peter Wasson, participants were given a sequence of 3 numbers and asked to figure out the rule governing the sequence by proposing their own sequences.
And let me guess, people kept proposing sequences that would confirm their hypothesis rather than trying to disprove it?
Exactly. The sequence was 2, 4, 6 feet, and most people guessed the rule was increasing by 2. They then proposed sequences like 8, 10, 12 feet to confirm their theory, but the actual rule was simply any increasing sequence. They could have discovered this by testing sequences that would disprove their hypothesis, like 1, 2, 3 feet or 5, 8, 104.
That's wild. So we naturally try to confirm our ideas rather than test if they might be wrong. This explains a lot about how hard it is to change people's minds.
It does, and it gets even more complex with motivated reasoning, where our emotional investments further drive this confirmatory tendency. This plays out dramatically in politics.
I've experienced this firsthand. Last Thanksgiving, my uncle and I looked at the exact same economic data and came to completely opposite conclusions about which political party was better for the economy.
That's so common. Research shows that when people are presented with identical facts, they're likely to become more polarized, not less. Each person filters information through their existing belief system and finds ways to discount contradictory evidence.
It's kind of depressing if you think about it. Is there any hope for us to overcome these biases?
Well, awareness is the first step, though it's not sufficient. Studies show that even when people are specifically instructed about confirmation bias and asked to avoid it, they still exhibit it. They just don't realize they're doing it.
So basically, I'm nodding along thinking, yes, other people definitely do this while being blind to my own biases.
That's the uncomfortable truth. In fact, there's a meta-bias called the bias blind spot, our tendency to recognize cognitive biases in others while failing to see them in ourselves.
This is getting very Inception-like. Bias is about our biases.
It really is. And it illustrates just how deeply these patterns are embedded in our cognitive architecture.
Let's move on to our next segment, overconfidence and the unknown unknown. I'm guessing this has something to do with how sure we are about things that might not be true.
Precisely. Overconfidence is one of the most pervasive cognitive biases. Most of us believe we're above average in almost everything: driving ability, intelligence, even predicting our own behavior.
I mean, I'm definitely an above average driver, though. Everyone who's ever been in my car says so.
And that's exactly the problem. Statistically, we can't all be above average, yet most people think they are. But the Dunning-Kruger effect takes this a step further.
Ah, isn't that where people who know very little about a subject are the most confident?
That's the popular interpretation, though the original finding is more nuanced. David Dunning and Justin Kruger found that people with low ability in a particular domain tend to significantly overestimate their capability. They lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their own incompetence.
I've definitely experienced the flip side of this. The more I learn about a topic, the more I realize how little I actually know. When I started reporting on climate science, I thought I understood it pretty well after a few books. 5 years later, I'm much less confident despite knowing far more.
That's the expertise paradox. As you develop genuine expertise, you become more calibrated about uncertainty and the limits of knowledge. Experts typically express more nuanced views with appropriate caveats.
So when someone claims absolute certainty about complex issues, that's actually a red flag.
Often, yes. Then there's what we call the illusion of explanatory depth, our belief that we understand complex systems in much more detail than we actually do.
Oh God, I fall for this constantly. Last month, my washing machine broke and I was absolutely certain I could fix it myself because I understood how washing machines work. 3 YouTube tutorials and 1 flooded laundry room later, I called a professional.
That's a perfect example. In experiments, people rate their understanding of devices like zippers or toilets quite highly, but when asked to explain exactly how they work, step by step, they quickly realize major gaps in their knowledge.
Wait, I just realized I'm not entirely sure how a zipper works at the mechanical level. Something about interlocking teeth?
See? And this applies not just to physical systems, but to political policies, economic proposals, or scientific theories. We think we understand why we hold certain positions, but our understanding is often surprisingly shallow.
So we're overconfident about how much we know, especially when we know very little, and we think we understand complex systems much better than we actually do. This is getting depressing, Clara.
Well, here's the silver lining. Truly knowledgeable people tend to be better calibrated about uncertainty. They know what they know, and importantly, what they don't know.
So the goal isn't perfect knowledge, which is impossible, but appropriate confidence that matches our actual level of understanding?
Exactly. Recognizing the limits of our knowledge is actually a sign of sophistication, not weakness.
Okay, final segment. Now that we've thoroughly undermined everyone's confidence in their own rationality, let's talk about debiasing strategies. Please tell me there's hope, Clara.
There is definitely hope. While we can't completely eliminate cognitive biases, they're built into how our brains work. We can develop strategies to mitigate their effects.
That's a relief. So what works?
First, simply being aware of specific biases makes a difference, especially in situations where you know they're likely to appear. For instance, before making a major purchase, remind yourself about anchoring effects when looking at prices.
I started doing something like this when buying electronics. I researched the actual specs and performance metrics before looking at prices, so I'm not just comparing to the original marked down price.
That's excellent. Another powerful strategy is to actively seek disconfirming evidence. This directly counters confirmation bias. We naturally look for information that supports our existing beliefs, so we need to deliberately search for contradictory viewpoints.
I've been trying to diversify my news sources, but honestly, it's uncomfortable reading perspectives I strongly disagree with.
It absolutely is uncomfortable. Our brains experience contradictory information almost like a physical threat, but that discomfort is often where growth happens.
What about for groups and organizations? Any strategies there?
Yes, and this is where some of the most effective debiasing happens. Diverse perspectives are crucial. Research shows that diverse teams make better decisions precisely because different viewpoints and experiences challenge implicit assumptions.
I've experienced that on editorial teams. When we have journalists from different backgrounds, we catch problematic framing or missing perspectives that would have slipped through otherwise.
That's exactly it. Another institutional approach is creating structured decision-making processes. For instance, some organizations use checklists or pre-mortems where they imagine a decision has failed and work backward to identify potential problems.
I love that pre-mortem idea. It's so much easier to spot problems when you're explicitly looking for them, rather than trying to maintain optimism about your brilliant plan.
Absolutely. And decision researcher Gary Klein has shown that pre-mortems can increase the identification of risks by 30%.
So it sounds like the key strategies are awareness of specific biases, deliberately seeking disconfirming evidence, embracing diverse perspectives, and using structured decision processes.
Yes, and I'd add one more: slowing down. Many biases thrive when we're making quick, intuitive judgments. Taking time to deliberate can help engage System 2 thinking.
That makes sense. I've definitely made my worst decisions when rushing or under pressure.
Haven't we all? And remember, the goal isn't perfect rationality. That's impossible given how our brains work. The goal is better decisions through awareness and thoughtful processes.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let me try to recap what we've learned about the illusion of rational thought.
Go for it.
So we started by challenging the myth of humans as purely rational beings, exploring how our thinking actually operates on two tracks: the fast, intuitive System 1 and the slower, more deliberative System 2.
And importantly, even when we think we're being purely rational, our emotions and intuitions are still hugely influential.
Right. Then we explored some of the major cognitive shortcuts like the availability heuristic, which makes us overestimate risks that are vivid or dramatic, anchoring effects that bias our judgments based on initial information, and priming, where subtle cues influence our thinking without awareness.
We also discussed confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out information that supports what we already believe while dismissing contradictory evidence, and how this contributes to polarization in areas like politics.
The section on overconfidence was particularly humbling, especially the Dunning-Kruger effect and the illusion of explanatory depth. Turns out I probably understand much less than I think I do about basically everything.
Laughs. Join the club. But remember, recognizing the limits of our understanding is actually a mark of intellectual sophistication.
And finally, we covered strategies for mitigating these biases: awareness, seeking disconfirming evidence, embracing diverse perspectives, using structured decision processes, and simply slowing down.
Perfect summary, Leo. The key takeaway is that while we can't eliminate cognitive biases entirely, understanding them gives us better tools to make more thoughtful decisions.
So what's coming up in our next episode?
Next time, we'll be exploring the social brain, discovering how our brains are fundamentally wired for social connection and how this shapes our identities, relationships, and sense of well-being.
I'm looking forward to that one. As someone who spent way too much time in isolation during the pandemic, I experienced firsthand how crucial social connections are.
It's going to be fascinating. We'll look at everything from the neurochemistry of bonding to how social media is changing our conception of relationships.
Can't wait. And a reminder to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with friends or colleagues who might find it interesting.
Hello and welcome to Self-Improvement Insights. I'm Clara, and this is such an exciting day. We're launching this podcast to dive deep into the books that have changed lives around the world.
And I'm Leo. I couldn't be more thrilled to start this journey with you, Clara. We've been planning this podcast for months, and it's finally happening.
It really is. For our listeners just tuning in, Self-Improvement Insights is our exploration of the most influential books for personal growth. We'll be covering everything from mindset and productivity to emotional intelligence and relationships.
Each episode will break down key concepts from these transformative works and share practical ways to apply them in everyday life. And honestly, I can't wait to get started with today's topic.
Me neither. Today, we're picking things off with Foundations of Mindset, Transformational Thinking, exploring how our thinking patterns shape our potential for success and fulfillment.
I've personally experienced how shifting my mindset has opened doors I never thought possible. Remember when I was stuck in that job I hated but was too afraid to leave?
Oh, yes. And now look at you running your own business and loving it. That's exactly why this topic matters so much. Small shifts in how we think can create massive changes in our lives.
Absolutely. We'll be drawing insights from pioneers like Carol Dweck, Stephen Covey, and Viktor Frankl, people whose work has truly changed the landscape of personal development.
So grab your notebook, find a comfortable spot, and let's dive into the foundations of transformational thinking. Let's start with Carol Dweck's groundbreaking work on mindset. Her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Successes, introduces this fascinating concept of fixed versus growth mindset.
I love Dweck's work. She really revolutionized how we understand human potential. The basic idea is that people with a fixed mindset believe their qualities are carved in stone, their intelligence and talents are just fixed traits.
Exactly. While those with a growth mindset believe their abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, the brain is like a muscle that gets stronger with use.
What I find fascinating is that Dweck's work isn't just theoretical, it's backed by decades of research. She studied thousands of children and found that their mindset plays a critical role in their motivation and achievement.
The science behind it is incredible. Studies show that when we believe our brains can grow and our abilities can improve, we approach challenges differently. We're more resilient in the face of setbacks.
I've seen this play out in my own life so many times. When I started my business, I had no idea what I was doing with the accounting side of things. I was terrible at it. But instead of thinking I'm just not a numbers person, I reminded myself I could learn and improve.
And you did. That's such a perfect example of growth mindset in action. For our listeners wondering how to develop more of a growth mindset, Dweck suggests becoming aware of your fixed mindset voice, those thoughts that tell you you can't do it or you're not smart enough.
Yes. And then challenging that voice. When you hear, I'm not good at this, add yet to the end of that sentence. I'm not good at this yet.
Another practical technique is to embrace challenges rather than avoid them. Seek out difficult tasks that will stretch you. And my personal favorite, learn to love the word yet.
Absolutely. I'm not a master of social media marketing yet. I haven't mastered Spanish yet. It opens up possibilities instead of shutting them down.
Now let's shift to Stephen Covey's transformative work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book has sold over 40 million copies worldwide for good reason.
It's a classic. Covey introduced this concept of the inside-out approach, the idea that private victories precede public victories. Personal change must happen before we can expect to influence our environment.
I love how he emphasizes personal responsibility. The very first habit is be proactive, taking initiative and responsibility for your life rather than blaming circumstances or other people.
That one hit me hard when I first read it. I realized how much time I spent in what Covey calls the circle of concern, complaining about things I couldn't control like the weather, the economy, other people's actions.
Instead of focusing on your circle of influence, the things you actually can do something about, I've found that to be so empowering in my own life. Last year, when our neighborhood was having those issues with litter, instead of just complaining, I organized a monthly cleanup. Small action, but it made a difference.
That's perfect. And it illustrates another key Covey principle, moving from dependence to interdependence. First, you become self-reliant and take responsibility, independence. Then you learn to cooperate effectively with others, interdependence.
Exactly. And Covey emphasizes that paradigm shifts, fundamental changes in how we see the world must precede behavior change. It's not just about changing what we do, but changing how we see.
I think that's why his work has such staying power. It's not just techniques or quick fixes, it's about transforming your entire perspective. When I changed how I viewed my problems at work as opportunities to learn rather than burdens, everything shifted.
Let's move to one of the most profound books ever written on finding purpose through suffering, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, this book changed my life, Clara. For those who don't know, Frankl was a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps during World War II, and he wrote about finding meaning even in the most horrific circumstances imaginable.
His central insight is so powerful that while we can't always control what happens to us, we always have freedom to choose our attitude toward what happens. That space between stimulus and response is our greatest power.
I remember reading this during a really difficult period in my life. Nothing comparable to what Frankl endured, of course, but I was going through a painful breakup and feel like everything was falling apart. His concept of tragic optimism, finding meaning even in suffering, completely transformed my perspective.
Can you explain that concept a bit more for our listeners?
Sure. Frankl talks about how we can remain optimistic despite the tragic triad of pain, guilt, and death that we all face as humans. He suggests we can find meaning in 3 ways: through work or creating something, through experiencing something or loving someone, and through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering.
I found his ideas so helpful when facing challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we can ask, "What meaning can I find in this? What is life asking of me right now?"
Exactly. And that brings up another key Frankl insight, that we shouldn't chase happiness directly. He said, "Happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue," as the unintended side effect of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself.
That's been true in my experience too. My happiest moments have come not when I was seeking happiness, but when I was fully engaged in meaningful work or connections with people I love.
Frankl's work really complements what we've discussed about Dweck and Covey. All three emphasize our power to choose our responses, even when we can't control our circumstances.
I'd love to talk about the science that supports these mindset principles, particularly neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections.
This is fascinating stuff. For decades, scientists believed that the brain was relatively fixed after childhood, but research in recent years has completely overturned that assumption.
Right. Studies show our brains continue to develop new neurons and neural pathways throughout our lives. When we practice new ways of thinking, we're literally rewiring our brains.
I read about a study with London taxi drivers that found their hippocampus, the area of the brain associated with spatial navigation, was significantly larger than average due to memorizing the complex street layout of London.
That's such a great example. Or how about stroke patients who can sometimes regain functions by training different parts of the brain to take over for damaged areas? Our brains are incredibly adaptable.
This science really supports Dweck's growth mindset theory. When we believe we can get better at something through practice, we're actually aligned with the biological reality of how our brains work.
Exactly. And there are practical exercises we can do to take advantage of neuroplasticity. Deliberate practice is key, not just repeating the same action, but pushing ourselves slightly beyond our comfort zone.
I've been trying to apply this with learning Spanish. Instead of just reviewing words I already know, I'm forcing myself to have conversations where I have to stretch. It's uncomfortable, but effective.
That's perfect. And consistency matters too. Research suggests it takes about 66 days on average to form a new habit, not the 21 days that's often claimed.
Yes, and that lines up with what brain researchers tell us about forming stable neural pathways. Change takes time, and that's okay. The important thing is consistent effort in the right direction.
Let's get super practical now. How can our listeners apply these mindset principles in their daily lives?
Great idea. One practice I found incredibly helpful is creating a morning routine that reinforces a growth mindset. I start each day with a short meditation and then write down 3 things I want to learn or improve that day.
I love that. I have a similar practice with journaling. One prompt I use regularly is, "What's one thing I failed at yesterday and what did I learn from it?" It helps me reframe setbacks as learning opportunities.
That's brilliant. Language patterns make a huge difference too. I try to catch myself when I use fixed mindset phrases like "I'm not good at math" and replace them with growth-oriented alternatives like "I'm working on improving my math skills."
Yes. Even small changes in language can shift our perspective. Instead of saying, "I have to do this," saying, "I get to do this," or "I choose to do this," reminds us of our agency.
Another practice that's helped me is surrounding myself with growth-minded people. I joined a mastermind group last year where everyone is focused on learning and improving, and it's been incredible for maintaining my motivation.
Community support is so important. For listeners looking for resources, there are some great online communities focused on personal growth. The Growth Mindset Network has excellent free resources, and there are several good courses on platforms like Coursera.
And don't underestimate the power of reading regularly. We're obviously big fans of the books we've discussed today, but there are so many great resources out there on mindset development.
Absolutely. Even just reading for 15 to 20 minutes a day from quality personal development books can gradually transform your thinking. It's like compound interest for your mind.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, this isn't about perfection. We all slip into fixed mindset thinking sometimes. The key is to notice when it happens and gently guide yourself back to a growth perspective.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. We explored Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindset, Stephen Covey's inside-out approach to effectiveness, and Viktor Frankl's profound insights on finding meaning even in suffering.
We also looked at the fascinating science of neuroplasticity that supports these theories and shared practical ways to apply these principles in everyday life.
The common thread through all of these ideas is that we have more power than we often realize to shape our thinking, and through that, to shape our lives. Our mindset isn't just a minor detail, it's the foundation that everything else builds upon.
Absolutely. And what gives me such hope is that these aren't just nice ideas. They're backed by research and the lived experience of millions of people who've applied these principles and transformed their lives.
I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to experiment with some of these mindset shifts in their own lives. Remember, you don't have to change everything at once. Small, consistent steps in the right direction can lead to remarkable transformations over time.
And speaking of next steps, I'm already excited about our next episode. We'll be exploring productivity mastery, from overwhelm to flow, diving into systems from authors like David Allen, Cal Newport, and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Yes, we'll uncover strategies to overcome procrastination, manage your energy instead of just your time, and achieve those focused, productive flow states that feel almost magical.
It's going to be fantastic. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd be so grateful if you'd share it with someone who might benefit, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
Until next time, keep nurturing that growth mindset. I'm Clara.
And I'm Leo. Thanks for joining us on Self-Improvement Insights.
Hello and welcome to Business Insights Mastering Professional English. I'm Clara Reynolds.
And I'm Leo Chen. We're thrilled to launch this new podcast series dedicated to helping professionals like you enhance your business English skills.
That's right. Whether you're a non-native English speaker looking to advance in an international workplace, or simply someone wanting to sound more polished in professional settings, we've got you covered.
Today marks our very first episode, which feels pretty special. I actually couldn't sleep last night, Clara. Too excited about this launch.
Neither could I. I was practicing my podcast voice in the shower this morning, and my partner thought I'd lost my mind.
Ha! Well, before we dive in, quick housekeeping note for our listeners. You can use the episode chat feature to ask questions about today's content. We'll try to address them in future episodes.
Perfect. So today's episode is all about first impressions, Introduction to Professional Business English. We'll be exploring how to make strong first impressions across various business contexts.
You know what they say? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Though I wish that weren't true for my first meeting with Clara here, when I spilled coffee all over my presentation notes.
Oh, stop. That was endearing, though maybe not the most professional introduction, which brings us perfectly to our first segment today. Let's talk about the power of professional introductions. First impressions can make or break business relationships, and they often start with how you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I've noticed there's a real difference between formal and informal greeting phrases. Clara, what's your take on when to use "Good morning, Ms. Johnson" versus "Hi, Sarah"?
Great question. In professional settings, it's generally safer to start more formal, especially when meeting someone for the first time. Good morning/afternoon, Mr. per megasecond, last name, shows respect. You can then follow the other person's lead. If they say, please call me first name, then you can shift to a more casual approach.
You know what I've always wondered about that? In some of the tech startups I've worked with, everyone uses first names immediately, even with the CEO. I felt awkward at first, coming from a more traditional background.
That's a valid point. Industry culture definitely plays a role. Tech and creative industries tend to be more informal, while legal, financial, and some international businesses often maintain more formality. When in doubt, observe what others do.
What about introducing yourself and your role? I've seen people ramble for 5 minutes about their job history when a simple introduction would do.
Oh, I've been trapped in those conversations too. The key is concision. A formula I recommend is, hello, I'm your name, your position at your company. I'm responsible for brief description of main responsibilities. Keep it under 30 seconds.
I'm guilty of over-explaining sometimes. Just last week, I gave my entire resume to someone who just wanted to know what department I worked in.
We've all been there. But let's talk about cultural considerations, because this is huge in global business. In some cultures, stating your achievements directly is expected, while in others, it might come across as boastful.
Right. I remember when I was working in Japan, business card exchanges were almost ceremonial. You had to use both hands and take time to read the card carefully before putting it away.
Exactly. And in many parts of Europe and Latin America, a kiss on the cheek might be normal. Whereas in North America or parts of Asia, that would be uncomfortably intimate for a business setting.
What are some common mistakes people should avoid when making introductions?
Mispronouncing names is a big one. If you're unsure, it's perfectly fine to politely ask, could you help me pronounce your name correctly? Also, avoid overly firm handshakes, looking at your phone, or forgetting someone's name immediately after they've told you.
I have a trick for remembering names. I repeat it back in the conversation. Nice to meet you, Sophia. So, Sophia, how long have you been with the company?
That's a great strategy. Another mistake is inappropriate humor or overly personal questions. Save those until you've established some rapport.
Let's move on to our next segment, establishing credibility through language. This is something I've really had to work on throughout my career.
It's crucial, isn't it? The vocabulary you choose can instantly signal your expertise level. Using industry-specific terminology accurately shows you know your field.
But there's a fine line between sounding knowledgeable and just show it off with jargon, right?
Absolutely. The goal is clarity, not confusion. I always say, use technical terms when they're the most precise way to communicate, but always be ready to explain them if needed. Nothing undermines credibility faster than misusing industry terms.
You know what I've always struggled with? Those filler words. That just slip out when I'm nervous.
We all do it, Leo. Research shows the average person uses fillers quite frequently. The key isn't to eliminate them entirely, that would sound robotic, but to reduce them, especially in formal presentations.
Any tips for that? I've tried pausing instead of saying but sometimes those pauses feel so awkward.
Pausing is actually perfect. What feels like an eternity to you is usually just a natural break to listeners. Recording yourself and practicing deliberately can help too. I still do this before big presentations. My dog has heard my TED Talk about 20 times.
Poor dog. Let's talk about confidence markers. What kind of language signals authority?
Good question. Phrases like, I recommend, my experience suggests, or based on the data sound more authoritative than tentative language like, I think, maybe, or I'm not sure, but perhaps. Declarative statements with evidence behind them build credibility.
I notice women sometimes get criticized for this more than men. My previous boss, brilliant financial analyst, got feedback to stop using phrases like I feel in meetings, while male colleagues weren't called out for the same thing.
That's unfortunately common. There are gender differences in how the same language is perceived. Research shows women often face a double bind, sound too tentative, and you lack authority, sound too assertive, and you might face backlash. It's unfair, but worth being aware of.
So how do we balance authority with approachability? I don't want to sound like a robot or a dictator.
It's all about mixing confidence with consideration. Phrases like, I'd like to suggest, or based on my experience, I believe, followed by sound reasoning, strike that balance. Also, acknowledging others with, that's an interesting point, before adding your perspective helps.
And I suppose body language plays into this too, though our listeners can't see us right now.
Definitely. Even over the phone or on a podcast like this, posture affects how your voice sounds. Sitting up straight actually changes your vocal quality. And in person, eye contact, a genuine smile, and an open posture all reinforce your verbal credibility.
Now let's tackle something I personally find challenging. Small talk. Our next segment is small talk mastery.
Small talk. The art of talking about apparently nothing while actually building important social connections.
That's exactly it. I used to think small talk was a waste of time, but I've learned it's actually crucial for relationship building. What topics work best in a business context?
Safe topics include current events, avoiding politics, industry news, the venue if you're at an event, whether as it affects plans, or general questions about someone's role or time with the company. Sports can work if you know the other person is interested.
What about personal topics? I'm never sure how personal to get.
Light personal topics can work well, weekend plans, vacation destinations, books, or shows if they come up naturally. But avoid anything that could be sensitive, like relationship status, salary, health issues, or strong political opinions.
You know what I've always wondered? How do you smoothly transition from small talk to actual business matters without it feeling abrupt?
That's an art form, isn't it? I like using bridge phrases like, before we dive into today's agenda, or while we're waiting for everyone to join for the small talk phase. Then to transition, try something like, shall we get started on discussing the project? Or, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on business topic.
I had a boss who was terrible at this. He'd be talking about football 1 second and then suddenly bark, quarterly numbers. Gave me whiplash.
That's exactly what not to do. Speaking of what to do, asking engaging questions is key to good small talk. Open-ended questions that show genuine interest work best.
Like what? Give me an example.
Instead of, did you have a good weekend? Which can be answered with just yes, try, what did you get up to this weekend? Also, follow-up questions show you're really listening. Oh, you went hiking? Which trail did you take?
That makes sense. And I suppose active listening is just as important as speaking?
Absolutely critical. Active listening cues include nodding, maintaining appropriate eye contact, and small verbal affirmations like I see or that's interesting. And most importantly, referring back to what someone said earlier shows you were genuinely paying attention.
I've noticed that in some cultures, the silence between remarks can be different lengths. In the US, we tend to jump in quickly, but in other places, it's normal to pause longer.
That's a brilliant observation, Leo. In Nordic countries and Japan, for instance, comfortable silence is more normal than in the US or Southern Europe. Being aware of these differences can prevent you from either dominating conversation or seeming disengaged.
Let's move to our next segment, digital first impressions. This feels especially relevant today with so much business happening online.
Definitely. The principles of first impressions apply digitally too, but with some unique considerations. Let's start with email introductions, often the very first contact you have with someone.
I get so many terrible email introductions. Just yesterday, I got one that started with "Hey" and had no signature. Not exactly confidence-inspiring.
Ouch! Professional email introductions should include a proper greeting, "Dear Mr. per megasecond," last name, or "Hello," first name, depending on your relationship. A clear statement of who you are, why you're reaching out, and what action you're hoping for. And always end with a professional sign-off like "Best regards" or "Sincerely."
What about subject lines? I never know if mine are too long or too vague.
Subject lines should be specific but concise. Introduction, your name from your company, works well for a first contact. Avoid all caps, excessive punctuation, or overly casual language. And please, no urgent unless it truly is.
You know what I've always wondered about? Video call etiquette. Working from home during the pandemic, I had to quickly figure out how not to look like a hostage victim on camera.
That makes two of us. I had to completely rearrange my home office. For video calls, lighting is crucial. Face a window or light source rather than having it behind you. Position your camera at eye level so you're not looking down at people. Test your audio beforehand and dress professionally, at least from the waist up.
What about backgrounds? My cat photobombed an important client meeting last month.
That probably made you more memorable, but generally aim for a neutral, uncluttered background or use a simple virtual background if your real environment is distracting. Also, remember to mute when not speaking in group calls and avoid multitasking. People can tell when you're checking email.
Let's talk about LinkedIn and professional social media. I'm never sure how formal to be there.
LinkedIn occupies a middle ground, more formal than Facebook, but less formal than a business letter. Your profile should use professional language and be error-free. For connection requests, always personalize with a brief note explaining why you want to connect.
And what about following up after digital introductions? I'm always afraid of being too pushy.
Following up is important, but timing matters. Wait at least 3 to 5 business days before a follow-up email, and keep it brief. I wanted to make sure you received my previous message about topic. For social media, commenting thoughtfully on someone's posts can be a non-intrusive way to stay on their radar.
I once had someone follow up 3 times in one day. Definitely didn't make me want to respond.
Exactly what not to do. The key is to be persistent but respectful. 1 initial contact and 1 to 2 follow-ups maximum with reasonable spacing between them.
Our final segment today covers cultural awareness in business greetings. This is so important in our global business environment.
Absolutely. Cultural missteps can derail business relationships before they even begin. Let's start with international greeting differences.
I learned this the hard way when I went in for a hug with a German business partner who was expecting a handshake. Talk about awkward.
Oh no! Physical greetings vary widely, from handshakes in North America and parts of Europe, to bows in Japan, to the air kiss in France and Latin America. When in doubt, wait for the other person to initiate or stick with a moderate handshake if you're expected to lead.
What about verbal greetings? I know some languages have different forms for formal versus informal you.
Great point. In English, we don't have formal and informal you anymore, but many languages do. French, vous versus tu, German, sie versus du, and so on. In business contexts in these cultures, always start with the formal version until invited to use the informal one.
You know what I've always wondered? How to address hierarchy appropriately across cultures? In some places I've worked, you practically need a flowchart to figure out who to speak to first.
That's not far off. In hierarchical cultures like many Asian, Middle Eastern, and some European contexts, it's important to acknowledge the most senior person first. Also, titles matter tremendously. Doctor, professor, or position titles should be used when applicable.
I remember visiting our Tokyo office and being surprised at how much people deferred to senior colleagues, waiting for them to speak first in meetings.
Absolutely. In contrast, Scandinavian and some North American business cultures are much flatter hierarchically. This connects to formality levels too. Some cultures maintain formal language throughout business relationships, while others move to first-name basis quickly.
So how do you navigate that? I don't want to seem disrespectful or overly stiff.
The safest approach is to start more formal than you think necessary and then match the level of formality others use. In East Asian contexts, err on the side of formality. In Australia or the US, being too formal might actually create distance.
What about building rapport across cultural divides? Are there universal approaches that work?
Showing genuine interest in someone's culture is usually appreciated, with thoughtful questions like, "What should I know about doing business in your country?" Just avoid making assumptions or stereotypes. Also, learning even a few words in someone's language makes a wonderful impression.
I tried that once and mispronounced a greeting so badly. I apparently said something mildly offensive. My colleague was gracious about it, though.
That's the thing, most people appreciate the effort, even if execution isn't perfect. Humility goes a long way. If you make a cultural misstep, a sincere apology and willingness to learn usually resolves the situation. Well, Leo, we've covered a lot of ground in our first episode. To recap, we've explored professional introductions, establishing credibility, mastering small talk, digital first impressions, and cultural awareness in business contexts.
I've learned so much already. What are some key takeaways our listeners should remember?
First, err on the side of formality at first, then adjust based on context. Second, be concise but informative when introducing yourself. Third, use confident language backed by evidence to establish credibility.
And don't forget about the importance of active listening and small talk, maintaining professionalism in digital communications, and being culturally aware in international business settings.
Exactly. These foundations set the stage for successful business interactions. And speaking of setting the stage, next time we'll be covering meeting mastery, vocabulary for effective business discussions.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that one. We'll explore how to contribute ideas confidently in meetings, navigate disagreements professionally, and use precise vocabulary that showcases your expertise.
We'll also cover phrases for facilitating discussions, summarizing key points, and ensuring everyone's voice is heard, mind skills that are valuable, whether you're leading a meeting or participating in one.
That sounds great. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with colleagues who might benefit. And remember, you can adjust your podcast settings for better preference matching.
Thanks for joining us for our very first episode of Business Insights, Mastering Professional English. I'm Clara Reynolds.
And I'm Leo Chen. Until next time, keep communicating confidently. Hello and welcome to AI Insight. I'm Leo, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be launching this podcast series with you all today. March 22nd, 2025. What a beautiful day to start demystifying the fascinating world of artificial intelligence.
And I'm Clara. Let's hope the servers don't crash mid-recording like during our test run yesterday. Technology, am I right? Always failing when you need it most.
Oh, Clara, that was just a tiny twitch. Today's going to be perfect. I've got such a good feeling about this series. We're going to explore the rapidly evolving field of AI, covering everything from basic definitions to complex applications and limitations.
Assuming anyone actually listens, but yes, over the next 8 episodes, we'll be diving into AI fundamentals, machine learning types, industry applications, language models, economic impacts, ethical challenges, societal effects, and existential risks. That's if we make it that far.
We absolutely will. And today we're starting with the foundations, demystifying AI, what it is and what it isn't. I can't wait to clear up some misconceptions.
God knows there are plenty. My neighbor thinks her smart thermostat is plotting against her. It's just changing the temperature based on basic algorithms, Brenda, not planning world domination.
That's exactly why we're doing this, to help people like your neighbor understand what AI can and cannot do. And speaking personally, I've been fascinated by AI since I was a kid watching sci-fi movies. What about you, Clara?
I got interested after my dating app kept matching me with guys who looked nothing like their profile pictures. Figured I should learn about the algorithms ruining my love life. Still single, by the way.
Well, I'm sure that will change soon. But for now, let's help our listeners understand what intelligence means, both the human and artificial kinds. So Clara, when we talk about intelligence, what does that actually mean to you?
Intelligence? It's that thing most people seem to lack when I'm stuck in grocery store lines or traffic. But technically speaking, human intelligence involves learning, reasoning, problem-solving, perception, and using language.
That's a great starting point. And artificial intelligence is essentially our attempt to create systems that can mimic those cognitive functions. Though I think it's so amazing how far we've come in replicating aspects of human thinking.
Mimic being the key word there. These systems aren't actually intelligent the way we are. They're just really good at pattern recognition. They don't understand anything they're doing.
That's an important distinction. And it brings us to an essential concept, the difference between narrow AI and general AI. Would you mind explaining that, Clara?
Sure. Narrow AI, also called weak AI, is designed to perform specific tasks, like your GPS finding the fastest route or a chess program beating grandmasters. It's specialized. General AI, or strong AI, would theoretically have human-level intelligence across all domains, reasoning, planning, solving problems, thinking abstractly, and so on. But despite what those Silicon Valley types claim in their press releases, we only have narrow AI right now.
That's absolutely right. And I think it's actually incredible what narrow AI can accomplish. My smart home system might not understand what music is, but it sure knows what I like to listen to when I get home from my morning run.
Yeah, and it's probably selling that data to advertisers so you can be bombarded with ads for running shoes you don't need. But your point stands, minus narrow AI is everywhere now, from recommendation systems to voice assistants that never understand what I'm actually asking for.
I've found that if you speak clearly and phrase things the right way, voice assistants work wonderfully. But I do agree that we're nowhere near general AI. These systems excel at specific tasks, but lack the holistic understanding and adaptability that defines human intelligence.
Exactly. Your GPS can tell you how to get to the store, but if a meteor crashed in the road, it wouldn't know to say, hey, maybe let's not drive toward the giant space rock. There's no common sense or contextual understanding.
Now that we've clarified what AI is at a basic level, let's take a quick journey through its history. AI has actually been around as a concept much longer than most people realize.
Yeah, unlike my houseplants that die within a week, AI has somehow survived for decades. The field officially began in the mid-1950s at the Dartmouth Conference, but the dream of creating thinking machines goes back centuries.
That's right. The Dartmouth Workshop in 1956 is widely considered the birth of AI as a formal field. Brilliant minds like John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon, and others came together with this wonderfully optimistic vision of creating machines that could think.
And then promptly entered what we call the AI winters because they overpromised and underdelivered. Classic tech industry. They thought they'd have thinking machines in a few years. Instead, they got programs that could barely play checkers.
That's a bit harsh, Clara. They made remarkable progress given the computing limitations of the time. But you're right that there were periods of reduced funding and interest, the AI winters, when early promises didn't materialize as quickly as hoped.
Remember when we tried to make that souffle in your new apartment and it collapsed into a sad puddle? That was basically AI research throughout the 70s and 80s.
Oh, that souffle attempt. But we learned from it just like AI researchers did. And speaking of learning, one of the most famous early AI programs was ELIZA in the 1960s, which simulated a psychotherapist. It was basically using pattern matching and scripts, but people actually formed emotional connections with it.
That says more about human loneliness than ELIZA's capabilities, but things finally started picking up in the 2010s with deep learning breakthroughs. In 2012, a neural network called AlexNet demolished the competition in an image recognition challenge, and suddenly everyone was throwing money at AI again.
Absolutely. That ImageNet competition was a turning point. And then we saw amazing progress with systems like AlphaGo beating world champions, and more recently, large language models like GPT, Claude, and their successors that can generate incredibly human-like texts.
Which has given us both helpful assistance and an explosion of convincing spam. Double-edged sword, as usual with technology.
I prefer to focus on all the positive applications, but you make a valid point about the challenges too. It's amazing to think about how far we've come from ELIZA to today's sophisticated systems.
Let's talk about what AI can't do, which is frankly a longer list than what it can. Despite the hysterical headlines about robot overlords, today's AI has serious limitations.
That's a really important point to clarify. There are indeed many misconceptions about AI capabilities. What do you think is the biggest myth people have, Clara?
That AI understands anything at all. It doesn't. It's pattern recognition all the way down. When ChatGPT or whatever writes a poem about love, it has no concept of what love is. It's just predicting what words typically follow other words based on the data it was trained on.
That's absolutely right. These systems don't have subjective experiences or consciousness. They're incredibly sophisticated pattern matchers, though I have to say they've gotten remarkably good at mimicking understanding through those patterns.
Sure, like those fake designer bags that look convincing until you actually try to use them and they fall apart. AI systems can seem intelligent until you push them beyond their training, ask them something genuinely novel or requiring real-world understanding, and they'll either hallucinate an answer or completely fail.
Hallucination is such an interesting problem, isn't it? That's when AI systems generate information that sounds plausible but is actually incorrect. It happens because they're trying to predict plausible text rather than retrieve factual information.
I had a language model tell me with complete confidence that I should feed chocolate to my sister's dog. Luckily, I know that's toxic to dogs, but someone else might have trusted it. These systems speak with authority even when they're dangerously wrong.
That's concerning. I've mostly had positive experiences, but that highlights the importance of using AI as a tool rather than an authority. Another limitation is transfer learning across domains. AI systems don't easily apply knowledge from one area to another the way humans do.
Right. An AI that masters chess isn't automatically good at checkers, much less something completely different like recognizing emotions or driving a car. Each task typically requires specific training.
Exactly. And despite tremendous progress in robotics, we're still far from having machines with the dexterity and physical intelligence of even a young child. A robot might beat you at chess, but it would struggle to clean up a broken glass safely.
My robot vacuum gets defeated by a stray sock. We're not exactly on the brink of Terminator here.
So now that we've covered the history and limitations, let's talk about where AI stands in 2025. And I have to say, it's an incredibly exciting time with so many breakthroughs happening.
If by exciting you mean slightly terrifying, but I guess we're doing this anyway, then sure. The pace of development has been relentless, especially with multimodal systems that can work with text, images, audio, and video simultaneously.
Yes, multimodal AI has been one of the biggest advances in recent years. These systems can understand the relationships between different types of data in ways that seem almost intuitive. I was using one yesterday that could take my vacation photos and create a perfectly narrated highlight video with appropriate music.
Meanwhile, I'm still trying to get my printer to connect to Wi-Fi. But yes, the capabilities have improved dramatically. We've also seen significant progress in few-shot and zero-shot learning, where AI can perform tasks with minimal or no specific examples.
That's been game-changing for accessibility. AI systems can now adapt to new scenarios much more flexibly. And the improvements in reasoning capabilities have been remarkable too. Some of the latest models can work through complex logic problems step by step.
Though they still make basic errors that any human would catch. Remember last month when that major language model insisted that humans have 3 legs? The confidence with which it stated complete nonsense was almost impressive.
That example does highlight that we still have challenges to overcome, but I'm encouraged by the research focused on making AI systems more reliable and truthful. There's been great progress in areas like constitutional AI and factuality improvements.
I'll believe in factual AI when I see it. But what I find interesting is the gap between cutting-edge research and what's actually implemented in the real world. Many businesses are still struggling to implement basic machine learning, let alone the fancy new systems making headlines.
That's a really good point about implementation lag. The most advanced AI capabilities often take time to filter into everyday applications, though I've noticed that cycle is getting shorter as tools become more accessible.
True. The barrier to entry has dropped significantly. You don't need a PhD to use AI tools anymore, which is both democratizing and concerning, depending on how responsibly they're used.
And that's why conversations like this one are so important. Understanding both the capabilities and limitations helps everyone use these tools more effectively and responsibly. Before we wrap up today's episode, I think it's important to clarify some terminology that often gets confused. There's AI, machine learning, deep learning, all these related terms that many people use interchangeably.
Oh God, yes. The number of startups slapping AI on basic automation or simple statistics is maddening. It's like calling a bicycle a personal transportation revolution device.
That's a colorful way to put it. So let's break it down simply. Artificial intelligence is the broadest term. It encompasses any technique that enables computers to mimic human intelligence.
Then machine learning is a subset of AI. Specifically, it's about creating systems that can learn from data rather than being explicitly programmed with rules. The system improves its performance as it's exposed to more examples.
Exactly. And deep learning is a further subset of machine learning, based specifically on artificial neural networks with multiple layers, hence deep. These systems have been responsible for most of the dramatic advances in AI over the past decade.
Right, so all deep learning is machine learning, and all machine learning is AI, but not all AI is machine learning, like how all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs, though I've met people with two left thumbs when it comes to technology.
That's a perfect analogy. And AI also has important relationships with adjacent fields. Big data provides the fuel that machine learning algorithms need to find patterns. Cloud computing offers the processing power needed for training complex models.
And let's not forget the Internet of Things, which creates a constant stream of sensor data for AI systems to work with. My smart refrigerator keeps telling me I'm out of milk even when I'm not. I'm starting to think it just doesn't like almond milk.
Your refrigerator might need a software update. But that example actually highlights something important. Not everything marketed as AI truly involves artificial intelligence. Some products use that terminology for simple rule-based systems or basic algorithms.
Exactly. If your toaster has 3 settings and calls itself AI-powered, it's not AI, it's marketing. A genuine AI system would learn your toast preferences over time based on your behavior.
Though I'd love a toaster that could learn exactly how I like my sourdough toasted. The point is that understanding these distinctions helps consumer and businesses make more informed decisions about technology. Well, we've covered so much ground today. We've talked about what intelligence means, traced AI's history from the 1950s to 2025, clarified what AI can and cannot do, and distinguished between AI and related technologies.
Hopefully we've helped at least a few people understand that their smart thermostat isn't secretly plotting against them. Though I wouldn't trust mine if I had one.
I'm sure we've done more than that. I think we've laid a solid foundation for understanding the rest of our series. Next time, we'll be diving into the AI toolbox, types of machine learning, where we'll explore supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and much more.
We'll break down how machines learn from labeled data, find patterns in unlabeled information, and improve through trial and error, assuming our equipment cooperates and the internet doesn't decide to take the day off.
It's going to be fascinating. We'll also cover deep learning, neural networks, and the crucial role that data quality plays in AI performance. I'm particularly excited to share some real-world examples of each approach.
If you're the kind of person who gets excited about algorithms and data structures, you'll probably want to tune in. If not, well, we'll try to make it painless.
Clara, I think learning about AI can be exciting for everyone, especially since it's becoming such an important part of our daily lives. I truly believe that understanding these technologies helps us use them more effectively and shape their development in positive ways.
Fine, you're not wrong. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to technologies that are increasingly making decisions that affect our lives. Better to understand AI than be blindsided by it.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with friends or colleagues who might benefit from demystifying AI. We'd love to build a community of informed listeners as we explore this fascinating field together.
Hey there! Welcome to another episode of Learning Hour, your daily dose of knowledge tailored just for you. I'm Clara.
And I'm Leo. Today we're diving into the wonderful world of television, particularly what's streaming on Apple TV and some current TV trends. Perfect for English language learners or anyone looking to stay current with popular shows.
I'm so excited about this topic. There's nothing better than discovering a new show that just grabs you and doesn't let go. I actually stayed up until 3 a.m. last night finishing the latest season of Slow Horses. Totally worth the lack of sleep.
Clara, you and your binge-watching habits. Remember when we were supposed to meet for brunch last month and you canceled because you'd been up all night watching Ted Lasso?
Hey, in my defense, it was the finale, and it was absolutely worth it. Such an uplifting show. Speaking of which, let's talk about some of the critically acclaimed shows available on Apple TV right now.
Apple TV has definitely emerged as a major player in the streaming world. They've got an impressive lineup of dramas like Severance, Defending Jacob, Shining Mirrors, Masters of the Air, and Hijack.
Don't forget The Buccaneers, Dark Matter, and Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. Oh, and Disclaimer looks fascinating too. I love that there's something for everyone.
And for sci-fi fans, there's For All Mankind, Foundation, and Silo. Plus, Pachinko and Slow Horses have been getting rave reviews.
The comedy lineup is just as impressive. Ted Lasso, obviously, but also Shrinking, Bad Sisters, Mythic Quest, and The Morning Show. I've been meaning to start Central Park. Have you watched it yet, Leo?
Not yet. It's on my ever-growing watch list. Along with Platonic, Loot, Presumed Innocent, and Schmigadoon, there's also Trying, Dope Thief, The Studio, and The After Party.
There's literally not enough hours in the day to watch everything, but that's a good problem to have, right? Always look on the bright side.
You and your silver linings, Clara. Some of us need sleep, you know.
Sleep is overrated when there's so much good TV. But seriously, these shows aren't just entertainment, they're actually really valuable for English language learners.
Absolutely. Television shows reflect and shape societal norms, values, and cultural diversity. They expose viewers to different accents, dialects, and colloquialisms, which is incredibly helpful for language learning.
Exactly. Take Ted Lasso, for example. It's known for its witty banter, optimistic outlook, and sports metaphors. As someone who always tries to find the positive in every situation, I really connect with Ted's character.
Meanwhile, a show like Severance employs more sophisticated vocabulary and complex sentence structures, plus it dives into corporate jargon and philosophical themes.
By the way, if you're watching the episode and have questions about any of the content we're discussing, you can use episode chat to get more details.
Good point. Now, shifting gears a bit, The Guardian recently reported on some interesting television trends, particularly a resurgence of nostalgic comedy.
Oh, I love that. There's something so comforting about revisiting familiar shows and characters.
They specifically mentioned the return of trigger-happy TV and reunions of casts from popular sitcoms like Men Behaving Badly. It seems viewers are craving that connection to shows they loved in the past.
That makes perfect sense to me. Even when times are tough, we can always find joy in revisiting old favorites. I still watch reruns of Friends whenever I'm having a bad day.
TV Line also highlighted some current shows with interesting plot developments like Adolescence, 1923, and Suits LA. They noted a casting choice I found interesting. Brooke Smith, who was in Silence of the Lambs, is now in a show about serial killers.
That's such clever casting. I love when shows make those kinds of connections that reward viewers who pay attention.
Whether it's exploring thought-provoking dramas or laughing along with comedies, television provides an engaging platform for English learners and casual viewers alike.
Absolutely. By immersing yourself in different shows, you're not just having fun, you're improving your language skills and gaining insights into the culture of English-speaking countries. It's a win-win.
For anyone interested in checking out the sources we mentioned today, you can find links in our show notes.
Well, that wraps up today's episode. I'm heading straight home to start another episode of Slow Horses. My optimism tells me I can definitely fit in at least 2 episodes before bedtime.
And I'll be catching up on some sleep, since some of us value our rest schedules.
You're missing out, Leo. Life's too short not to enjoy every amazing show out there. Anyway, thanks for joining us today on Learning Hour. Until next time, keep watching and learning.
See you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to Business Insights Mastering Professional English. I'm Clara Reynolds.
And I'm Leo Chen. We're thrilled to launch this new podcast series dedicated to helping professionals like you enhance your business English skills.
That's right. Whether you're a non-native English speaker looking to advance in an international workplace, or simply someone wanting to sound more polished in professional settings, we've got you covered.
Today marks our very first episode, which feels pretty special. I actually couldn't sleep last night, Clara. Too excited about this launch.
Neither could I. I was practicing my podcast voice in the shower this morning, and my partner thought I'd lost my mind. Ha!
Well, before we dive in, quick housekeeping note for our listeners. You can use the episode chat feature to ask questions about today's content. We'll try to address them in future episodes.
Perfect. So today's episode is all about first impressions, Introduction to Professional Business English. We'll be exploring how to make strong first impressions across various business contexts.
You know what they say? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Though I wish that weren't true for my first meeting with Clara here, when I spilled coffee all over my presentation notes.
Oh, stop. That was endearing, though maybe not the most professional introduction, which brings us perfectly to our first segment today. Let's talk about the power of professional introductions. First impressions can make or break business relationships, and they often start with how you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I've noticed there's a real difference between formal and informal greeting phrases. Clara, what's your take on when to use "Good morning, Ms. Johnson" versus "Hi, Sarah"?
Great question. In professional settings, it's generally safer to start more formal, especially when meeting someone for the first time. Good morning/afternoon, Mr. per megasecond, last name, shows respect. You can then follow the other person's lead. If they say, please call me first name, then you can shift to a more casual approach.
You know what I've always wondered about that? In some of the tech startups I've worked with, everyone uses first names immediately, even with the CEO. I felt awkward at first, coming from a more traditional background.
That's a valid point. Industry culture definitely plays a role. Tech and creative industries tend to be more informal, while legal, financial, and some international businesses often maintain more formality. When in doubt, observe what others do.
What about introducing yourself and your role? I've seen people ramble for 5 minutes about their job history when a simple introduction would do.
Oh, I've been trapped in those conversations too. The key is concision. A formula I recommend is, hello, I'm your name, your position at your company. I'm responsible for brief description of main responsibilities. Keep it under 30 seconds.
I'm guilty of over-explaining sometimes. Just last week, I gave my entire resume to someone who just wanted to know what department I worked in.
We've all been there. But let's talk about cultural considerations because this is huge in global business. In some cultures, stating your achievements directly is expected, while in others, it might come across as boastful.
Right. I remember when I was working in Japan, business card exchanges were almost ceremonial. You had to use both hands and take time to read the card carefully before putting it away.
Exactly. And in many parts of Europe and Latin America, a kiss on the cheek might be normal. Whereas in North America or parts of Asia, that would be uncomfortably intimate for a business setting.
What are some common mistakes people should avoid when making introductions?
Mispronouncing names is a big one. If you're unsure, it's perfectly fine to politely ask, could you help me pronounce your name correctly? Also, avoid overly firm handshakes, looking at your phone, or forgetting someone's name immediately after they've told you.
I have a trick for remembering names. I repeat it back in the conversation. Nice to meet you, Sophia. So, Sophia, how long have you been with the company?
That's a great strategy. Another mistake is inappropriate humor or overly personal questions. Save those until you've established some rapport.
Let's move on to our next segment, establishing credibility through language. This is something I've really had to work on throughout my career.
It's crucial, isn't it? The vocabulary you choose can instantly signal your expertise level. Using industry-specific terminology accurately shows you know your field.
But there's a fine line between sounding knowledgeable and just show it off with jargon, right?
Absolutely. The goal is clarity, not confusion. I always say, use technical terms when they're the most precise way to communicate, but always be ready to explain them if needed. Nothing undermines credibility faster than misusing industry terms.
You know what I've always struggled with? Those filler words. They just slip out when I'm nervous.
We all do it, Leo. Research shows the average person uses fillers quite frequently. The key isn't to eliminate them entirely, that would sound robotic, but to reduce them, especially in formal presentations.
Any tips for that? I've tried pausing instead of saying but sometimes those pauses feel so awkward.
Pausing is actually perfect. What feels like an eternity to you is usually just a natural break to listeners. Recording yourself and practicing deliberately can help too. I still do this before big presentations. My dog has heard my TED Talk about 20 times.
Poor dog. Let's talk about confidence markers. What kind of language signals authority?
Good question. Phrases like, I recommend, my experience suggests, or based on the data sound more authoritative than tentative language like, I think, maybe, or I'm not sure, but perhaps. Declarative statements with evidence behind them build credibility.
I notice women sometimes get criticized for this more than men. My previous boss, brilliant financial analyst, got feedback to stop using phrases like I feel in meetings, while male colleagues weren't called out for the same thing.
That's unfortunately common. There are gender differences in how the same language is perceived. Research shows women often face a double bind, sound too tentative, and you lack authority, sound too assertive, and you might face backlash. It's unfair, but worth being aware of.
So how do we balance authority with approachability? I don't want to sound like a robot or a dictator.
It's all about mixing confidence with consideration. Phrases like, I'd like to suggest, or based on my experience, I believe, followed by sound reasoning, strike that balance. Also, acknowledging others with, that's an interesting point, before adding your perspective helps.
And I suppose body language plays into this too, though our listeners can't see us right now.
Definitely. Even over the phone or on a podcast like this, posture affects how your voice sounds. Sitting up straight actually changes your vocal quality. And in person, eye contact, a genuine smile, and an open posture all reinforce your verbal credibility.
Now let's tackle something I personally find challenging. Small talk. Our next segment is small talk mastery.
Small talk. The art of talking about apparently nothing while actually building important social connections.
That's exactly it. I used to think small talk was a waste of time, but I've learned it's actually crucial for relationship building. What topics work best in a business context?
Safe topics include current events, avoiding politics, industry news, the venue if you're at an event, whether as it affects plans, or general questions about someone's role or time with the company. Sports can work if you know the other person is interested.
What about personal topics? I'm never sure how personal to get.
Light personal topics can work well, weekend plans, vacation destinations, books or shows if they come up naturally. But avoid anything that could be sensitive, like relationship status, salary, health issues, or strong political opinions.
You know what I've always wondered? How do you smoothly transition from small talk to actual business matters without it feeling abrupt?
That's an art form, isn't it? I like using bridge phrases like before we dive into today's agenda or while we're waiting for everyone to join for the small talk phase. Then to transition, try something like, shall we get started on discussing the project? Or I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on business topic.
I had a boss who was terrible at this. He'd be talking about football 1 second and then suddenly bark, quarterly numbers. Gave me whiplash.
That's exactly what not to do. Speaking of what to do, asking engaging questions is key to good small talk. Open-ended questions that show genuine interest work best.
Like what? Give me an example.
Instead of, did you have a good weekend? Which can be answered with just yes, try, what did you get up to this weekend? Also, follow-up questions show you're really listening. Oh, you went hiking? Which trail did you take?
That makes sense. And I suppose active listening is just as important as speaking?
Absolutely critical. Active listening cues include nodding, maintaining appropriate eye contact, and small verbal affirmations like I see or that's interesting. And most importantly, referring back to what someone said earlier shows you were genuinely paying attention.
I've noticed that in some cultures, the silence between remarks can be different lengths. In the US, we tend to jump in quickly, but in other places, it's normal to pause longer.
That's a brilliant observation, Leo. In Nordic countries and Japan, for instance, comfortable silence is more normal than in the US or Southern Europe. Being aware of these differences can prevent you from either dominating conversation or seeming disengaged.
Let's move to our next segment, digital first impressions. This feels especially relevant today with so much business happening online.
Definitely. The principles of first impressions apply digitally too, but with some unique considerations. Let's start with email introductions, often the very first contact you have with someone.
I get so many terrible email introductions. Just yesterday, I got one that started with hey and had no signature. Not exactly confidence-inspiring.
Ouch! Professional email introductions should include a proper greeting, dear Mr. per megasecond, last name, or hello, first name, depending on your relationship. A clear statement of who you are, why you're reaching out, and what action you're hoping for. And always end with a professional sign-off like, best regards, or sincerely.
What about subject lines? I never know if mine are too long or too vague.
Subject lines should be specific but concise. Introduction, your name from your company, works well for a first contact. Avoid all caps, excessive punctuation, or overly casual language. And please, no urgent unless it truly is.
You know what I've always wondered about? Video call etiquette. Working from home during the pandemic, I had to quickly figure out how not to look like a hostage victim on camera.
That makes two of us. I had to completely rearrange my home office. For video calls, lighting is crucial. Face a window or light source rather than having it behind you. Position your camera at eye level so you're not looking down at people. Test your audio beforehand and dress professionally, at least from the waist up.
What about backgrounds? My cat photobombed an important client meeting last month.
That probably made you more memorable, but generally aim for a neutral, uncluttered background or use a simple virtual background if your real environment is distracting. Also, remember to mute when not speaking in group calls and avoid multitasking. People can tell when you're checking email.
Let's talk about LinkedIn and professional social media. I'm never sure how formal to be there.
LinkedIn occupies a middle ground, more formal than Facebook, but less formal than a business letter. Your profile should use professional language and be error-free. For connection requests, always personalize with a brief note explaining why you want to connect.
And what about following up after digital introductions? I'm always afraid of being too pushy.
Following up is important, but timing matters. Wait at least 3 to 5 business days before a follow-up email and keep it brief. I wanted to make sure you received my previous message about topic. For social media, commenting thoughtfully on someone's posts can be a non-intrusive way to stay on their radar.
I once had someone follow up 3 times in one day. Definitely didn't make me want to respond.
Exactly what not to do. The key is to be persistent but respectful. 1 initial contact and 1 to 2 follow-ups maximum with reasonable spacing between them.
Our final segment today covers cultural awareness in business greetings. This is so important in our global business environment.
Absolutely. Cultural missteps can derail business relationships before they even begin. Let's start with international greeting differences.
I learned this the hard way when I went in for a hug with a German business partner who was expecting a handshake. Talk about awkward.
Oh no! Physical greetings vary widely, from handshakes in North America and parts of Europe, to bows in Japan, to the air kiss in France and Latin America. When in doubt, wait for the other person to initiate or stick with a moderate handshake if you're expected to lead.
What about verbal greetings? I know some languages have different forms for formal versus informal you.
Great point. In English, we don't have formal and informal you anymore, but many languages do. French, vous versus tu, German, sie versus du, and so on. In business contexts in these cultures, always start with the formal version until invited to use the informal one.
You know what I've always wondered? How to address hierarchy appropriately across cultures? In some places I've worked, you practically need a flowchart to figure out who to speak to first.
That's not far off. In hierarchical cultures like many Asian, Middle Eastern, and some European contexts, it's important to acknowledge the most senior person first. Also, titles matter tremendously. Doctor, professor, or position titles should be used when applicable.
I remember visiting our Tokyo office and being surprised at how much people deferred to senior colleagues, waiting for them to speak first in meetings.
Absolutely. In contrast, Scandinavian and some North American business cultures are much flatter hierarchically. This connects to formality levels too. Some cultures maintain formal language throughout business relationships, while others move to first-name basis quickly.
So how do you navigate that? I don't want to seem disrespectful or overly stiff.
The safest approach is to start more formal than you think necessary and then match the level of formality others use. In East Asian contexts, err on the side of formality. In Australia or the US, being too formal might actually create distance.
What about building rapport across cultural divides? Are there universal approaches that work?
Showing genuine interest in someone's culture is usually appreciated, with thoughtful questions like, what should I know about doing business in your country? Just avoid making assumptions or stereotypes. Also, learning even a few words in someone's language makes a wonderful impression.
I tried that once and mispronounced a greeting so badly. I apparently said something mildly offensive. My colleague was gracious about it, though.
That's the thing. Most people appreciate the effort, even if execution isn't perfect. Humility goes a long way. If you make a cultural misstep, a sincere apology and willingness to learn usually resolves the situation. Well, Leo, we've covered a lot of ground in our first episode. To recap, we've explored professional introductions, establishing credibility, mastering small talk, digital first impressions, and cultural awareness in business contexts.
I've learned so much already. What are some key takeaways our listeners should remember?
First, err on the side of formality at first, then adjust based on context. Second, be concise but informative when introducing yourself. Third, use confident language backed by evidence to establish credibility.
And don't forget about the importance of active listening and small talk, maintaining professionalism in digital communications, and being culturally aware in international business settings.
Exactly. These foundations set the stage for successful business interactions. And speaking of setting the stage, next time we'll be covering meeting mastery, vocabulary for effective business discussions.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that one. We'll explore how to contribute ideas confidently in meetings, navigate disagreements professionally, and use precise vocabulary that showcases your expertise.
We'll also cover phrases for facilitating discussions, summarizing key points, and ensuring everyone's voice is heard, mind skills that are valuable, whether you're leading a meeting or participating in one.
That sounds great. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with colleagues who might benefit. And remember, you can adjust your podcast settings for better preference matching.
Thanks for joining us for our very first episode of Business Insights, Mastering Professional English. I'm Clara Reynolds.
And I'm Leo Chen. Until next time, keep communicating confidently.
Hey there! Welcome to Social Media Insights, your daily dose of everything you need to know about the online world. I'm Clara.
And I'm Leo. We're here to break down the latest trends, strategies, and tips to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of social media.
Today, we've got an absolutely packed episode about social media strategies for 2025. We're talking posting frequency, content creation, video production, everything you need to know to stand out online.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover. I was actually up late last night trying to edit some videos for my sister's bakery Instagram. Not my finest work, I'll admit.
Oh, I'm sure it turned out great. You always underestimate yourself. Besides, we've got some tips today that might make your next editing session even better.
Let's start with some posting frequency guidelines. This is something I know a lot of people struggle with. How often should you actually be posting on different platforms?
Great place to start. For Instagram, the sweet spot seems to be about 3 to 5 times per week.
Facebook is a bit more demanding at 1 to 2 times daily, while X, formerly Twitter, needs even more attention at 2 to 3 times daily.
LinkedIn is more relaxed, with once daily being sufficient. Pinterest needs at least once weekly, and YouTube can be either daily or weekly, depending on your content strategy.
But remember, these are just guidelines. I made the mistake of trying to post 3 times a day on every platform when I first started managing social media for my band last year. Nearly burned myself out in 2 weeks.
Oh, I remember that phase. You were constantly on your phone during our coffee meetups. But you know what? That experience taught you something valuable. Quality over quantity is what really matters. It's so much better to post amazing content less frequently than mediocre content all the time.
Speaking of quality content, there's been a major shift towards short-form video across platforms. According to Ad Age, the average consumer spends over 50 minutes daily watching video content across different platforms.
TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts vertical video is absolutely dominating right now. My nephew taught me how to use all these features last weekend, and I've been hooked ever since. Started a little series showing my morning gardening routine, and people seem to love it.
That's awesome, Clara. I'd love to see those. And what's interesting is that Dustin York, an adjunct professor at the University of Florida, points out that the nature of virality has completely transformed. A viral YouTube video a decade ago could lead to significant opportunities, but today, viral moments are much more fleeting.
That's so true. You need to have a plan for what happens after something goes viral. How are you going to translate that momentary attention into sustainable growth? That's the real challenge.
Exactly. And York also mentions that we're moving from generalists to specialists. The days of building a massive following as a jack of all trades are pretty much over.
Oh, I love that point. Finding your niche is so important. It allows you to connect more deeply with your audience and perform better with algorithms. I've seen this work amazingly well for my friend who went from general fitness content to specifically focusing on home workouts for busy parents. Her engagement tripled.
Let's talk about Instagram specifically, since it remains such a powerhouse platform. The Strategy Hour podcast recently featured content strategist Taylor Ruan discussing what's working on Instagram right now.
I love that podcast. Taylor always has such great insights. And on the same topic, John Santalis published an article on Medium called Instagram Marketing: 10 Strategies to Boost Engagement and Successes, that emphasizes how important Instagram is as a marketing tool for brands and businesses.
He advocates for a strategic approach including profile optimization, content diversification, user-generated content, and influencer partnerships. I've been experimenting with user-generated content for a small coffee shop I help out with, and it's been surprisingly effective.
That's fantastic. User-generated content is such a win-win. The customers feel valued, and you get authentic content without having to create it all yourself. I'm always telling people to embrace these strategies. There's no downside.
Sprout Social also published a relevant article titled How to Build a Brand on Instagram, a 7-step playbook for social media managers, which emphasizes adapting to Instagram's rapid evolution, setting strategic goals, identifying target audiences, and creating engaging content.
Building community is definitely key on Instagram. I've found that responding to every comment, even with just an emoji, makes such a difference in follower loyalty. People just want to feel heard.
Switching gears a bit, let's talk about video production. According to Project Aeon, there's a rising importance of budget-conscious video production in today's marketing landscape.
Yes, and this is such good news for small businesses and creators. You don't need a Hollywood budget to create engaging content. It's all about creativity and strategic resource allocation.
They noted that 50% of companies now handle video production in-house, compared to only 13% relying solely on outsourced teams. This shift highlights the increasing emphasis on speed, content volume, and cost efficiency.
That makes perfect sense. My brother-in-law just started filming all the promotional videos for his landscaping business on his smartphone, and honestly, they look amazing. He bought a $30 gimbal and a clip-on microphone, and the quality is totally professional enough for social media.
Speaking of equipment, Project Aeon points out that modern smartphones have impressive video capabilities that can be enhanced with affordable accessories like stabilizer gimbals, external microphones, and LED lights.
And don't forget about lighting. Good lighting makes such a difference. It doesn't have to be expensive sometimes. Just positioning yourself near a window or using some strategically placed lamps can dramatically improve your video's look. I rearranged my entire home office after learning this.
A Medium article also emphasizes the transformative role of video editing in enhancing content. Viewers decide whether to engage with a video within seconds, so effective editing is crucial to maintain their attention.
Absolutely. First impressions are everything in video. I've been using DaVinci Resolve. It's free and surprisingly powerful for beginners like me. Have you tried it, Leo?
I haven't tried that one yet. I've been using Premiere, but I've heard great things about DaVinci. The article mentions that as channels grow, investing in more advanced software with features like multicam editing, motion graphics, and advanced audio mixing becomes beneficial.
That makes sense. Start simple and upgrade as you grow. The article also highlights common editing mistakes to avoid, like inconsistent audio levels, jarring jump cuts, ignoring aspect ratios, and overusing effects.
I'm definitely guilty of overusing effects when I first started editing. I thought more transitions meant more professional, but it actually just looked chaotic.
We've all been there. But that's what growth is all about. I love how you can laugh about it now. And honestly, sometimes those early experiments lead to discovering your own unique style. I accidentally applied a weird color filter to one of my garden videos, and people loved it so much it became my signature look.
Let's not forget about hashtags. They're a crucial tool for improving content visibility and connecting with relevant audiences.
Oh, hashtags can make such a difference. I used to just make them up on the spot, but now I use hashtag generators to find the ones that will actually help my content get discovered. It's changed everything.
That's smart. The research also mentions that social media advertising is becoming increasingly important. Paid social strategies, different advertising formats across platforms, and effective ad creation are all key components of a comprehensive strategy.
Exactly. Organic reach can only take you so far these days. Even a small budget for boosting posts or running targeted ads can dramatically increase your visibility. I started putting just $20 a week toward promoting my most important content, and the difference has been night and day.
Buffer, a social media management tool, emphasizes the importance of having a well-defined social media strategy. This should include identifying your target audience, defining content pillars, selecting appropriate platforms, and establishing a posting frequency.
And a content calendar is absolutely essential for maintaining consistency. I used to just post whenever inspiration struck, but planning ahead has been a game changer. Now I batch create content on Sundays when I'm feeling creative, and I'm set for the whole week.
I think we've covered a ton of ground today. To summarize, focus on quality over quantity, embrace short-form video, find your niche, be authentic, and don't be afraid to start with budget-friendly production tools.
And remember that a comprehensive strategy should integrate organic posting, paid advertising, and consistent engagement with your audience. Oh, and if you have any questions about anything we covered today, feel free to use episode chat. We're happy to provide more details on any of these topics.
All of our sources are linked in the show notes if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics. Buffer, Ad Age, Computer World, Project Aeon, and those Instagram marketing resources are all there.
That's our show for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, social media is constantly evolving, but with the right strategies, you can absolutely thrive online. I'm always telling my friends, adaptability is your superpower in this space.
Exactly. And there's always something new to learn. Clara, didn't you mention you were going to experiment with that new Instagram feature this weekend?
I am. I can't wait to try those new interactive stickers everyone's talking about. I'll definitely report back on how it goes next time. Until then, stay creative and keep sharing your authentic self online.
Hey there, welcome to Exploring How Technology Shapes Society. I'm Leo, and I'm here with the always insightful Clara. We're diving into the digital deep end today.
Hi, I'm Clara. Thanks for joining us for another episode where we'll be exploring the complex relationship between technology and society. Leo, I spent the weekend at that tech ethics conference I mentioned last time, and let me tell you, it gave me so much to think about.
Oh, that's right. The one with the fancy snacks you were excited about? How was it?
The snacks were actually disappointing, all kale chips and kombucha, but the discussions were fascinating. It really got me thinking about how completely surrounded we are by technology now from the moment we wake up to when we go to sleep.
Tell me about it. My smart speaker decided to randomly announce the weather at 3 a.m. last night. Nothing like being told it's partly cloudy while you're in REM sleep.
Ha! Technology isn't always perfect, is it? Speaking of which, today we're taking a comprehensive look at how technology is fundamentally reshaping our society, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So Leo, I think it's important to start with some historical context. Our current tech-saturated reality didn't just happen overnight.
Right. I was just reading about this. It's like we've been on this path for centuries, starting with the Enlightenment era, where thinkers began viewing humans as part of a mechanical universe.
Exactly. According to research from Psychology Today, our current technological immersion is really the culmination of 5 major historical movements. The Enlightenment introduced rationalism with philosophers like Descartes viewing humans as complex machines, while Rousseau and Locke suggested human nature could be shaped by external forces.
Then the scientific revolution came along with Newton and Galileo talking about a clockwork universe governed by predictable laws. I remember learning about this in that history of science class. One took, the one where I accidentally set off the fire alarm during my presentation.
How could I forget? The professor still mentions it at department meetings. But yes, then the Industrial Revolution applied these mechanistic principles to production and labor, prioritizing efficiency above all else.
And in the 20th century, we got cybernetics and systems theory, suggesting that even complex human behavior could be understood through feedback loops.
Which brings us to our current digital age, the apex of this century's long trajectory, where digital systems, algorithms, and data permeate virtually every aspect of our lives.
It's kind of wild when you think about it. My grandfather still talks about getting their first telephone when he was a kid, and now I get annoyed if my AI assistant takes more than 2 seconds to tell me how tall Mount Everest is.
That's a perfect example of how rapidly technology has evolved. And it's creating what the Mises Institute describes as a paradox of progress. We have unprecedented opportunities and global interconnectedness, yet simultaneously face overwhelming uncertainties and anxieties about the future.
I feel that paradox every day. Like when I'm on vacation and I'm relieved, I can instantly check if my flight is delayed, but then I end up in a work Slack thread at the beach. The boundaries just keep blurring.
Absolutely. The internet has revolutionized communication, but as research shows, it's truly a double-edged sword. While it bridges geographical gaps and offers instant communication, it also creates challenges like information overload and that exact blurring of work-life boundaries you mentioned.
Let's talk about social media specifically. I noticed you were off Instagram for a while. Was that a deliberate digital detox?
Good observation. Yes, I needed a break. The research is pretty clear that constant stimulation from social media and the pressure to maintain an online persona can negatively impact mental well-being, particularly among adolescents. It's linked to anxiety, depression, and body image concerns.
I've definitely felt that social comparison thing. Everyone's posting their highlight reels while I'm sitting there in my sweatpants eating cereal for dinner. Again?
You're definitely not alone in that feeling. But social media affects more than just our personal well-being. It's reshaping our political landscape too. Various studies show how platforms like Facebook and Twitter have transformed political communication and engagement.
Right. The 2016 US presidential election was a major turning point where we saw how these platforms could be used to influence voter behavior. And it's been creating concerns about misinformation, privacy, and even foreign interference in democratic processes.
Exactly. Social media has created echo chambers that contribute to political polarization, making it increasingly difficult to have reasoned debates across ideological lines.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of concerning aspects of technology, but I feel like we should acknowledge the amazing benefits too. I mean, I had a video call with my cousin in Japan this morning, something that would have been science fiction a few decades ago.
You're absolutely right, Leo. Technology empowers individuals and communities in unprecedented ways. It provides access to information and educational resources that were previously inaccessible to many people around the world. And it can amplify marginalized voices in ways traditional media never could.
And let's not forget the incredible advances in healthcare and how technology is helping us address global challenges like climate change. My partner just got a new medical device that monitors their chronic condition in real time and sends alerts to their doctor. It's literally life-changing technology.
That's a wonderful example. And speaking of life-changing technology, we should definitely talk about AI, which is rapidly transforming the landscape of technology and society.
AI, everyone's favorite topic these days. I just tried one of those AI image generators yesterday. I asked it to create a squirrel playing chess with a flamingo, And the result was surprisingly plausible.
That's the fun side of AI, but there are serious concerns too. One of the most pressing is the lack of transparency in AI algorithms. They've become so complex that even experts struggle to understand how they arrive at decisions.
That's scary when you think about how many important decisions are being influenced by AI now. Hiring, lending, law enforcement.
Exactly. And research has shown that AI systems in these areas can perpetuate existing societal biases, disproportionately impacting marginalized communities.
There's also the whole job displacement concern, right? I was talking to a friend who works in logistics, and they're seeing entire warehouses becoming automated.
That's a significant concern. While AI is expected to create new jobs, there are valid questions about whether displaced workers will have the skills and training necessary to transition into these new roles. And the benefits of AI-driven productivity gains aren't always equally distributed, potentially widening socioeconomic gaps.
Then there's the potential for misuse, everything from autonomous weapons to generating disinformation. It's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It is concerning, but I think it's important to remember that AI also offers tremendous potential for positive change, revolutionizing healthcare, improving education, enhancing accessibility for people with disabilities, and accelerating scientific discovery.
Speaking of change, I was reading that organizations are having to completely rethink how work happens because of these emerging technologies.
Absolutely. According to Harvard Business Review, organizations must adapt to meet the expectations of a changing workforce by 2025 to stay competitive. Emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and Web3, are fundamentally changing how we work.
I've experienced this firsthand. My brother's company went fully remote after the pandemic, and now they've got team members across 5 different time zones. The technology enabling that kind of collaboration just wasn't available even a decade ago.
That's a perfect example. The nature of work is evolving rapidly, and it raises important questions about the future. How do we maintain our autonomy in a world increasingly governed by algorithms? How do we protect privacy as our lives become more digitized? How do we ensure technological benefits are distributed equitably?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? And there are no easy answers.
No, but what's important is that we're asking them and trying to shape technology in ways that align with our values. If you're interested in digging deeper into any of the topics we've discussed today, you can check out the show notes for this episode, which include links to all the sources we referenced.
And if you have specific questions about anything we covered or want more details, you can always use the episode chat feature to explore further.
Experts emphasize that addressing these technological challenges requires collaboration between policymakers, industry leaders, researchers, and the public. By prioritizing ethical considerations, transparency, and accountability, we can harness the transformative power of technology for good.
Well said, and with that, we're just about out of time for today. This has been Exploring How Technology Shapes Society. I'm Leo.
And I'm Clara. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share a link with friends or colleagues who might find it interesting. Hello there, wonderful to have you with us today. I'm Clara, and welcome to a fresh episode of Cultural Insights, your daily dose of fascinating cultural explorations tailored just for you.
And I'm Leo, joining Clara as always. Today we're diving into something I think many of us have experienced or dreamed about: cultural immersion, whether through language learning, travel, or food.
I'm so excited about this topic, Leo. There's something so beautiful about connecting with different cultures. It really opens up your world in the most amazing ways.
Let's start with language learning as a pathway to cultural immersion. There's some interesting research about how people use language exchange apps like Tandem to connect with native speakers.
I love this. Users on these platforms are learning all sorts of languages: Chinese, Korean, French, Spanish, Italian. And what's so wonderful is that they're not just focused on grammar and vocabulary, they're seeking genuine human connections.
Right, and what stands out is that many users specifically mention wanting deeper cultural exchanges, not just casual language practice. They want to understand customs, traditions, and really get immersed in the culture. That reminds me of when I started learning Portuguese last year. I was so nervous at first about making mistakes, but the Brazilian language partners I found were incredibly supportive. We ended up sharing recipes and music recommendations, and it made the whole learning experience so much more meaningful. I've had similar experiences, though I remember one language exchange that went hilariously wrong. I was practicing my German and accidentally told my conversation partner I collected garden gnomes instead of that I enjoyed gardening. We still laugh about my extensive gnome collection to this day.
That's adorable. And you know what? Even those awkward moments are part of the learning journey. The research shows that many language learners face challenges like shyness or fear of making mistakes, but staying positive and embracing those moments is the key to progress.
Speaking of cultural immersion, there's some fascinating research about the role of food as a gateway to understanding different cultures. Bob's Red Mill highlights how engaging with diverse culinary traditions can lead to a deeper appreciation of customs and lifestyles.
Food truly is a universal language. I think it's one of the most joyful ways to connect with another culture. When you learn about the history behind dishes like traditional St. Patrick's Day meals or Mexican mole sauce, you're not just learning about food, you're discovering values, history, and traditions.
And it goes beyond just eating. The research emphasizes the importance of authenticity when recreating cultural dishes, encouraging people to learn about the background and techniques to maintain that connection between ingredients and their origins.
Absolutely. Last summer, I took a Thai cooking class, and our instructor spent nearly half the time explaining the philosophy behind Thai food, balanced the sweet, sour, salty, and spicy elements. It completely transformed how I approached cooking the dishes. The pad thai I made tasted 1,000,000 times better once I understood the cultural context.
There's also this growing trend of culinary tourism that's mentioned in the Simple View article. Destination marketing organizations are incorporating food-centric experiences into their strategies because travelers increasingly want to connect with local communities through cuisine.
That's such a positive development. Places like Tucson, Arizona have even been designated a UNESCO City of Gastronomy for blending Mexican and Native American culinary traditions. And other places like Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley and San Francisco showcase their diverse food landscapes through festivals and farmers markets. How wonderful that food is becoming recognized as such an important part of cultural identity.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about cultural immersion for students and individuals living abroad. The research highlights programs like World Strides and the Turkish Council's language courses that emphasize community engagement.
These programs sound amazing. World Strides focuses on developing skills like collaboration and leadership, while students immerse themselves in diverse cultures. Their programs in countries like the Dominican Republic, Peru, Costa Rica, and South Africa blend service projects with language immersion. What an enriching combination.
And the Turkish Council takes a really comprehensive approach. They integrate intensive language courses with cultural activities like Turkish cuisine classes and traditional games. They even arrange for students to stay with local families.
Living with a host family is such a fantastic opportunity. My cousin did that in Japan, and even though it was challenging at first, she came back with not just better Japanese skills, but with this deep appreciation for Japanese family dynamics and daily routines. These experiences go so far beyond what you could learn in a classroom.
Though there are certainly challenges too. Research from the journal Language and Intercultural Communication identified some significant obstacles for students studying abroad, particularly in China and Saudi Arabia.
What kind of obstacles did they find? I'm sure there are solutions or silver linings to those challenges.
Language barriers were a major one. Students reported insufficient foreign language skills and lacked social and cultural background knowledge. In Saudi universities specifically, international students struggled with various Arabic accents and often felt intimidated, leading to isolation.
That's completely understandable, but the beautiful thing is that awareness is the first step toward improvement. The research also found some positives, right? I believe every challenge presents an opportunity for growth.
You're right, Clara. The studies showed that mutual support, collaborative discussion, and critical reflection within internationalization at home programs enhanced intercultural experiences and skills. So there are definitely approaches that can help overcome these barriers.
That's exactly what I love to hear. With the right support systems and a positive attitude, these challenges can transform into the most meaningful learning experiences.
As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear that cultural immersion, whether through language learning, food experiences, or study abroad programs, offers incredible opportunities for personal growth and understanding.
Absolutely. And what stands out to me is that despite the challenges like language barriers or unfamiliarity with customs, people remain so enthusiastic about connecting across cultures. That human desire to understand each other and share experiences is just beautiful and inspiring.
Well said. And for our listener, we hope this episode has given you some food for thought about your own cultural immersion experiences, or perhaps inspired you to seek some out.
We'd love to know what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to share a link with friends who might be interested in cultural immersion too. Hey there, welcome to Social Insights Live. I'm Clara, and today we're diving into the ever-changing world of social media, technology trends, and how they're shaping our digital lives.
And I'm Leo, ready to explore this digital wilderness with you. You know, it's funny how we're using technology to talk about technology. It's like that time I tried to explain to my grandmother what a podcast was while she was accidentally recording a voice memo on her phone.
Classic Leo story, but seriously, today's episode is packed with fascinating insights about social media's evolution, AI advancements, and the challenges we're all facing in this increasingly digital world.
Yeah, and speaking of challenges, I spent 3 hours down a social media rabbit hole last night when I just wanted to check one notification, so this topic hits close to home.
Let's start with how social media activism is changing. According to an opinion piece in The Inquirer, there's a significant generational divide in political engagement. The author, John Kobe-Bellode, a 20-year-old student, compared his generation's social media activism with his father's experiences during the 1986 EDSA revolution in the Philippines.
That's fascinating. So it's like comparing street protests to hashtag campaigns?
Exactly. While social media gives us platforms for dissent and solidarity, Ballon argues that its ephemeral nature can actually hinder sustained action. The constant flood of information leads to what some call compassion fatigue.
Oh, I know that feeling. I've found myself scrolling past causes I genuinely care about just because there's so much to process. It's like information overload. 1 minute you're signing a petition about climate change, and the next you're watching a cat riding a Roomba.
And it's not just the endless scroll that's concerning. This ties into discussions on Hacker News, where users express disillusionment with mainstream platforms like Reddit. Many are lamenting the decline of niche communities and meaningful interaction.
You know what's also troubling? The broligarchy issue. I hadn't heard that term before reading our research.
Right. It's a term describing the predominantly male leadership in the tech industry. According to Adweek, this imbalance is directly shaping the social media landscape, often to the detriment of women and marginalized groups.
The data from Talkwalker is alarming too, showing a sharp increase in gendered slurs and violent language directed at women online. That's not the internet I want to be part of.
Absolutely not. And it undermines social media's potential to create inclusive communities. I've experienced this firsthand in some professional tech forums, posting the exact same comment as a male colleague, but getting questioned or dismissed.
That's awful, Clara. And it reminds me of that bigger challenge with content moderation and platform accountability. The research mentioned Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which shields platforms from liability for user-posted content.
Yes, and this protection is facing increasing scrutiny as lawsuits pile up against social media giants. Some cases allege that recommendation algorithms have contributed to harm by amplifying dangerous content.
It's this constant tension between free speech and user safety. How do we balance that?
Speaking of balance, let's shift to some fascinating research about VR and social media. Matilde Tassinari, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Helsinki, suggests that VR has the potential to reshape identity and minimize bias.
Wait, so virtual reality might actually help us overcome prejudice? That's a plot twist I didn't see coming.
According to Psychology Today, her research centers on the concept of a common cyber identity fostered within VR environments. The idea is that immersive technology can promote empathy and inclusivity.
That's incredible. It's like how wearing someone else's shoes helps you understand them, but in this case, you're literally seeing through their virtual eyes. I tried VR gaming at my nephew's birthday party last month, and it was mind-blowing how quickly I felt present in that world.
It's promising, but social media's impact on mental health is still concerning. A study from Simon Fraser University identified something called delusion amplification by social media, where platforms can worsen self-perception issues.
So basically, scrolling through perfectly filtered vacation photos while I'm eating cereal for dinner isn't great for my self-esteem. Who would have thought?
The study suggests that people with existing mental health conditions may turn to social media due to isolation, but the curated realities often make things worse. And users on Fark.com commenting on the study expressed concerns about social media perpetuating fear and anger.
This reminds me of another interesting finding. There's been a measurable decline in human cognitive skills since the rise of social media and passive content consumption.
Yes, that study published in the journal Intelligence and highlighted by Natural News points to drops in reading rates and reasoning abilities, especially among young people.
You know, I've noticed this in myself. Last week, I caught myself staring at a 3-paragraph email like it was War and Peace. I remember when I used to read actual books for fun.
The increasing reliance on AI raises similar concerns about the erosion of independent thinking. And speaking of AI, it's transforming various industries beyond social media.
Absolutely. I read in Newsweek about AI's potential to revolutionize healthcare and finance. They're even hosting a 2025 AI Impact Summit to discuss practical strategies and ethical deployment.
And Dev.to explored how AI and blockchain technology are converging to drive innovation. Blockchain's decentralized nature enhances the trustworthiness and accountability of AI applications.
That's fascinating. It's like two technological powerhouses joining forces. They mentioned projects like SingularityNet, an open marketplace for AI services, and Ocean Protocol, which enables secure data access while preserving privacy.
Forbes also highlighted Elon Musk's AI chatbot Gruff, which is having a significant impact on social media platforms, especially X, formerly Twitter.
I tried Grok last weekend. It's definitely different from other chatbots, has this sarcastic edge that's either refreshing or slightly alarming, depending on your perspective.
This all ties into the rapidly shifting landscape of social media. Instagram is reportedly considering a separate Reels app to compete with TikTok, and Forbes raised concerns about user privacy as these technologies advance.
It's like this constant tech arms race. But there's another interesting trend pulling in the opposite direction, the resurgence of long-form content.
Dawn's exploration of this trend notes that podcasts in particular are seeing a surge in popularity. Content creator Kahazi Akbar suggests this shift is driven by people's desire for deeper connections and meaningful conversations.
That makes so much sense. I've found myself gravitating toward podcasts and longer videos lately. There's something satisfying about a complete thought that you just don't get in a 15-second clip.
Right? Short-form content can leave audiences feeling rushed and commodified, especially with sponsored content. Long-form allows for more nuanced discussions and organic integration of ads.
Who knew that in our rush to make everything shorter and faster, we'd circle back to craving depth? Humans are complicated.
We've covered a lot today, from the challenges of social media activism to the potential of VR and AI. By the way, if you have any questions about anything we've discussed in this episode, you can use the episode chat feature to dive deeper.
And don't forget to check out the show notes if you want direct links to any of the sources we mentioned. Psychology Today, Forbes, Newsweek, it's all there.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, what do you think about this shift toward deeper engagement, Leo? Do you see it as a pushback against algorithm-driven content?
I think it's partly that, but also just human nature seeking balance. We swung so far into the short attention span territory that we're naturally course correcting. Like how I went all in on digital books a few years ago, and now I'm back to collecting hardcovers because I missed the feel and smell of real pages.
That's a really good point. Technology changes quickly, but human needs remain pretty consistent.
Well, that's our show for today. We hope these insights gave you something to think about as you navigate your own digital experiences.
Good morning, Sunshine. I'm Clara, and you're tuned into the very first episode of Morning Kickstart. I'm literally buzzing with excitement about launching this series with all of you wonderful listeners.
And I'm Leo. Couldn't be happier to be here co-hosting with the eternally cheerful Clara. We're launching this podcast because we truly believe that how you start your morning can transform your entire day and ultimately your life.
Absolutely right. And today's date is March 20th, 2025, the perfect day to kickstart something new. For those just joining us, Morning Kickstart is all about exploring the most effective habits and rituals to jumpstart your day.
We'll be diving into research, sharing practical tips, and hopefully inspiring you to create a morning routine that works specifically for you. Not everyone's morning should look the same, and that's the beauty of it.
Oh, and before we jump in, quick note for all our listeners, you can use episode chat to ask questions about anything we discussed today. We'd absolutely love to hear from you.
Today's episode is The Science of Morning Routines, where we'll explore why morning routines actually matter from a scientific perspective. The biology, the neuroscience, the whole shebang.
I can't wait. Let's get started. Let's kick things off with our first segment, Why Mornings Matter. There's something truly magical about those first few hours after waking, isn't there, Leo?
There really is. And it's not just a feeling, there's actual biological significance to our first waking hours. Research shows that the early part of our day is when our prefrontal cortex, that's the decision-making part of our brain, is most active.
That makes so much sense. I've always noticed that I make my best decisions in the morning. By afternoon, I'm like, what's for dinner? And my brain just shuts down. That's actually something called decision fatigue, right?
Exactly. Throughout the day, we make hundreds of decisions: what to wear, what to eat, which email to answer first, and each one depletes our mental energy. So by starting with a routine, you're saving that brain power for more important decisions.
I experienced this firsthand last month when I was working on that big marketing project. The days I stuck to my morning routine, everything flowed better. But when I skipped it and jumped straight into emails, total disaster. My decisions got worse as the day went on.
I've been there too. There are actually fascinating research on willpower depletion from psychologist Roy Baumeister. He found that willpower is like a muscle that gets tired from use. So if you use up your willpower resisting the snooze button or deciding what to have for breakfast, you have less available later.
Oh, is that why Steve Jobs and other tech leaders often wore the same outfit every day to reduce decision fatigue?
That's exactly it. By automating those morning decisions through routines, you're essentially preserving your mental energy for where it really counts later in the day.
I love that. Creating a morning routine isn't about adding more to your plate. It's actually about making the rest of your day easier.
Now let's get into something I find really fascinating: the neuroscience of morning habits. Clara, did you know that our brains physically change when we establish consistent morning routines?
Wait, really? Our brains actually change? That sounds incredible.
They absolutely do. When we repeat activities, our brain creates neural pathways, essentially making those behaviors more automatic and requiring less mental effort over time.
That's like how I don't even think about brushing my teeth anymore. My brain just knows it's part of the morning program. My body practically walks to the bathroom on autopilot while I'm still half asleep.
Exactly. And there's this concept called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Consistent morning routines take advantage of this to literally rewire our brains for greater efficiency.
So when people say it takes 21 days to form a habit, there's actually brain science behind that?
Well, the 21-day rule is a bit oversimplified. Research from University College London actually suggests it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with an average of 66 days for a habit to become automatic.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So it might take longer than we think to really cement a morning routine?
Potentially, yes. But here's something cool: different morning activities release different neurochemicals. For example, morning exercise boosts dopamine and serotonin, which improve mood and focus.
That explains why I feel so amazing after my morning run. Even on days when I really don't want to do it, I always feel better afterward. My neighbors probably think I'm crazy, smiling and waving as I jog past their houses at 6:30 a.m.
You're not crazy, you're neurochemically enhanced. And things like meditation trigger GABA release, which reduces anxiety. Morning journaling can activate the brain's reward centers too.
So you're saying we can basically hack our brain chemistry with the right morning activities? That's incredible.
That's exactly it. And the consistency is key. The more regularly you perform these activities, the stronger those neural pathways become, and the more your brain comes to expect and benefit from those neurochemical rewards.
Let's move on to our next segment, circadian rhythms and productivity. This is something I've been really interested in lately because I always thought I was just not a morning person until I learned about chronotypes.
Yes, chronotypes are fascinating. For listeners who aren't familiar, your chronotype is basically your body's natural preference for sleeping and waking. Some people are early birds, some are night owls, and some are in between.
I always felt guilty for not being one of those 5 a.m. club people, but then I discovered I'm what researchers call a bear chronotype. I do best with a standard 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. schedule.
Exactly. And I'm more of a wolf, naturally inclined to stay up later and wake up later. It's actually counterproductive to force yourself into a schedule that fights your chronotype.
So true. But light exposure really matters too, doesn't it? I got one of those sunrise alarm clocks last year, and it's been a game changer for waking up during the winter months.
Light exposure is crucial. Morning sunlight signals your brain to stop producing melatonin, the sleep hormone, and starts your body's daily hormonal cascade. Research shows getting 10 to 15 minutes of morning light can improve sleep quality the following night.
I've been trying to eat breakfast on my porch when the weather's nice. Speaking of timing, isn't there research about optimal windows for different types of work?
Absolutely. For most people, they'll remember chronotypes differ. Analytical work that requires focused attention is best done in the morning. Harvard Business Review published research showing that cognitive performance peaks about 2 to 4 hours after waking.
That makes sense. I always schedule my writing and strategy work before noon, then after lunch when I hit that slump. The one.
Oh, I know it well. The dreaded afternoon productivity dip.
Right. That's when I switch to more collaborative or creative work. It seems to match my energy levels much better.
That's smart scheduling. Research supports that approach too. Creative insights often come when our brains are slightly fatigued and the prefrontal cortex, which can sometimes inhibit creative connections, relaxes a bit.
So our morning routine should ideally match our chronotype and task-appropriate energy levels? That's a lot to consider.
It is, but it's worth it. When you align your schedule with your body's natural rhythms, you're working with your biology rather than against it, and that makes everything easier.
Let's talk about what I call the ripple effect, how your morning sets the tone for your entire day. Have you ever noticed how one good thing in the morning seems to lead to another, Leo?
Absolutely. There's actually a psychological concept called momentum that explains this. When you accomplish something first thing in the morning, even something small like making your bed, it creates a sense of achievement that can carry forward.
I've experienced that. Last week I woke up and immediately did a quick 10-minute yoga session instead of checking my phone. The whole day just flowed better. I was more patient with my dog when he knocked over his water bowl, which would normally make me grumpy.
That's a perfect example. Research from the Journal of Positive Psychology found that small wins activate the reward circuitry in our brains, releasing dopamine, which increases motivation and positivity. It creates this cascade effect.
It's like compound interest for your day. One good decision makes the next one easier.
Exactly. And over time, these daily habits create what author James Clear calls the compound interest of self-improvement. The effects might seem small day to day, but they accumulate dramatically over months and years.
I think that's why consistency matters so much more than perfection. It's better to have a simple morning routine you actually do every day than an elaborate one you only manage once a week.
100% agree. I remember when I first tried to establish a morning routine, I tried to include meditation, journaling, exercise, reading, and a homemade breakfast all before 8 a.m. It was completely unsustainable.
Oh no! What happened?
I lasted exactly 3 days before I overslept, and the whole thing fell apart. Now I have 3 non-negotiable morning activities that take 20 minutes total, and I've maintained them for over 2 years.
That's impressive, and it probably has a much bigger impact on your life than that perfect but impossible routine would have.
Exactly. The compound effect of those consistent 20 minutes has been remarkable. And research backs this up. B.J. Fogg, a behavior scientist at Stanford, advocates for tiny habits that build on themselves rather than massive changes.
I love that approach. It makes building a morning routine feel accessible to everyone, not just super disciplined productivity gurus.
Now it's time for one of my favorite segments, debunking morning myths. There are so many misconceptions about what makes an ideal morning routine.
Oh, I know. Like the myth that everyone needs to wake up at 5 a.m. to be successful. That one drives me crazy.
Yes, the 5 a.m. club works great for some people, but it's definitely not universal. In fact, forcing yourself to wake up too early for your chronotype can be counterproductive.
Right? I tried the whole 5 a.m. thing last year because I read this book that promised it would change my life. I was a complete zombie by 3 p.m., and my work actually suffered.
That's because you were fighting your natural biology. Research from the Sleep Foundation shows that insufficient sleep impairs cognitive function, mood regulation, and even immune system functioning. So waking up ultra early but getting poor quality sleep is a net negative.
What about the myth that you need to have this elaborate hour-long routine to see benefits?
Another great one to debunk. Studies show that even simple 5 to 10 minute routines can provide significant benefits if they're consistent. It's really about quality over quantity.
That's such a relief to hear. I sometimes feel inadequate when I see these influencers with their 2-hour morning routines. I'm like, when do these people work?
Haha, I know, right? And let's be honest, most of us have constraints like kids, commutes, or early meetings that make those elaborate routines impractical.
Oh, and what about the cold shower thing? Everyone seems to be doing cold plunges and ice baths in the morning now.
While there is some research supporting cold exposure for improving circulation and reducing inflammation, it's definitely not essential for everyone. And for some people with certain health conditions, it could actually be harmful.
I tried it once, and I screamed so loud my neighbor texted to check if I was okay. Not all evidence-based practices work for all people.
Exactly. The best routine is one that works with your lifestyle, preferences, and goals. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, despite what some productivity gurus might claim.
I think that's so important for our listeners to hear. Your morning routine should feel good and serve you, not stress you out or make you feel like you're failing at life.
Absolutely. The research consistently shows that personalization and consistency matter more than following someone else's ideal routine.
We've covered so much ground today. Let's recap some of the key scientific insights about morning routines.
First, we learned that mornings matter biologically because our prefrontal cortex is most active, giving us better decision-making capacity and willpower.
Then we explored how consistent morning habits create neural pathways in our brains, making positive behaviors more automatic over time.
We also discussed how understanding your chronotype helps you optimize your morning schedule, along with the importance of morning light exposure for regulating your circadian rhythm.
The ripple effect was one of my favorite concepts, how those morning wins create momentum that carries throughout your day and compound over time.
And finally, we debunked some common morning myths, emphasizing that personalization beats perfection when it comes to creating a sustainable routine.
I feel so energized after this conversation, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to experiment with their own morning routines.
Me too. And speaking of what's coming next in our second episode, we'll be focusing on building your foundation, essential morning habits.
Yes, we'll explore the core habits that form the foundation of an effective morning routine. We'll look at fundamental practices that research shows provide the greatest benefits for most people.
I can't wait for that one. We'll get really practical and give listeners specific habits they can implement right away.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend who might benefit. And you can always adjust your podcast settings for better preference matching.
And don't forget to use that episode chat feature if you have questions about anything we discussed today. We'd love to hear from you and know what morning routine elements you're curious about.